We all got tired of hearing about it last year during the Synod on Synodality, and yet the modernists in Rome won't take no for an answer. So Francis just gave them a major victory. What we got tired of hearing about last year in the Synod was the need for deaconesses and to make the church more inclusive of women in positions of authority. Which has to make that claim, you have to disregard the very fact that most parishes are in fact run in their day-to-day operations by women who typically dominate your parish council boards, run most of the ministries, and all the rest of the things in your typical ordinary form parish in America and well beyond. To say that women have no influence in the life of the church is on its face nonsensical, yet it's a claim they made repeatedly. I just had a video the other day of a modernist theologian saying that the church basically used to ordain women and no longer does, and we need to restore the diaconate. They won't let it go away. So Francis gave them a major victory to that end. He did so in the last couple of days, and when the story broke, I had a feeling another shoe was going to drop, and it did. So let's now talk about the story that should send a chill down the spine of anybody who is either in a religious community or is themselves or has great devotion and love of religious, whether they're nuns and sisters or monks and brothers, does not matter. Religious are the prayer warriors of the faith. Go read the Chesterton poem Lepanto if you want some good insight into that. Go just read what the saints had said about what role religious play in the life of the church. So we go for the initial update on this to english.catholic.de with this headline: First woman in this position, Pope appoints nuns as prefect. The female form of a prefect was previously unknown in the Vatican. This is now changing. For the first time, the Pope is appointing a woman to head one of his dicasteries. Simona Brambilla should already be well versed in her new position. And I'm going to say right now, I am sure she's a nice lady. She kind of, reading a few interviews with her, she seems like a fairly nice person. She's also a material heretic, and as I'm going to show you that shortly, a material heretic is someone who adopts a heretical position or opinions, but doesn't necessarily realize it's heresy. They've been, formed in heresy their entire lives. Frankly, these days, most Catholics are material heretics because quite a number of Catholics think the church allows them to pick and choose their morality, or thinks that the church doesn't have the authority to tell people how to live as Catholics when it comes to behind closed doors activities or on the nature of life itself and anything about morality. It's typically morality, or they believe that the church teaches that the Eucharist is a symbol and not actually the real presence of our blessed Lord. That's a material heretic is. Either they basically misunderstand the church's authority and they misunderstand what the church teaches on subjects. Here's the key lesson from this article. And remember, this is published by the English language version of Katholisch. This is the German bishops. This is their English speaking portal. When they publish something, they're endorsing it, whatever the thing says. The article, quote, "For the first time, a woman will head a Vatican authority. On Monday, Pope Francis appointed the religious Simona Brambilla as prefect of the dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and the Societies of Apostolic Life. She previously held the second highest post in the dicastery as secretary. The Pope appointed Cardinal Angel Fernandez as pro-prefect." This is where the legal violation comes in. Brambilla is a member of the Consolata Missionary Sisters. She worked in Mozambique and completed a doctorate in psychology at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome in 2008. From 2011 to May 2023, she was Superior General of her congregation. She has been a member of the Dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life, which she now heads since 2019. The dicasteries in the Vatican are comparable to ministries in a government. They're not headed by a minister, but by a prefect. The second rank, which is held by a Secretary of State in a ministry, is called Secretary in the Vatican. He is supported in his work by under-secretaries. In his reform of the Curia, which was completed in 2022, Pope Francis opened up the highest Curia offices to lay people for the first time, both male and female, and I reported on that when it happened. Until now, the only head of authority without any ecclesiastical ordination was the head of the Vatican Communications Dicastery, Paolo Ruffini. The Vatican's Secretariat for the Economy is also headed by a layman, Maximino Cabero Ledo. It's been done a couple times, but of course this is making headlines because this is a woman doing it. The legal problem you run into is you now have a cardinal in a position where he has to answer to a nun. It's an inversion, a diabolical inversion of reality, but it also violates several bits of canon law. Not that anybody seems to care about canon law anyway. Now, this story wasn't relegated only to the German bishop's website. They gave us some more details here from at a Catholic World Report. So we turn to them with this headline. Here's what to know about the first female Vatican prefect in the Catholic Church's history. Again, she seems like a nice lady. She is going to be the friendly, smiling voice for synodality. That's what you're going to hear. In terms of optics, this will placate Francis's allies, at least a little bit, who demand women have authority roles in the church. This is him throwing them a bone, basically. For his adversaries, including the independent media, she represents an appointment that's going to make it hard to criticize, which is why I'm just going to run headlong into this. You can expect Vatican cardinals and even Francis to have harsh words for those of us who critique her. But make no mistake, she is a synodalist through and through. Here's the key lesson from the article. Quote, Brambilla, who will turn 60 on March 27th, had been serving as secretary at the same dicastery since October 2023. At that time, she was the second woman to hold such a position, after Sister Alessandra Maria was appointed to the dicastery for promoting integral human development in 2021. I can't help but laugh every time I see that dicastery. The dicastery for promoting integral human development. That's the sustainability dicastery in the Vatican, because apparently the gospel requires sustainable development for some reason. Moreover, just last month on December 13th, 2024, Brambilla was appointed by the Pope to be a member of the Ordinary Council of the General Secretariat of the Synod, which, quote, is responsible for the preparation and realization of the Ordinary General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops. Regarding this appointment, the Italian nun said, and here we go into material heresy, quote, I deeply believe in the synodal journey. We have lived and are living an experience of the Spirit, which impels the Church to walk together in mutual listening and mutual edification. From this experience, there is no going back. We go forward and we go inward, deeper, involved, and caught up in a spiral movement that, with strength and gentleness, brings us to the essentials of who we are as Christians, brothers and sisters in Christ, lightened, disarmed, and freed from the various armors and vestments we may be wearing, she added. End quote. If I had read that to you and told you that was Pope Francis saying that, you'd believe me, because it sounds like something he would say. And that's modernism, just through and through. It is textbook modernism, right out of the pages of Pope St. Pius X's landmark encyclical Pascendi. I have the full document here and a single video on this channel. I have something like 15 or 20 videos breaking it down into smaller sections that are easier to follow on this channel. I implore you to go through that series, because Pascendi explains everything we're going through. In that document, Pope Pius X condemns the heresy of modernism on numerous grounds, including what you just heard here, reducing religion to the personal feelings and experiences of the individual person. Invoking lived experiences is a modern version of relativism, which the Church condemns. Here's your reminder that not all of the modernists are foaming at the mouth radicals who are overtly mean-spirited and can't hide their contempt for the traditional Catholic faith. Most of the modernists are not the McElroys and Supiches and Francises of the world. Some of them are, frankly, quite nice people. They mean well, and people who love our Lord but still are material heretics, at least because they completely don't understand what the Church teaches on most things, including this religion being this inward experience nonsense. The lived experience stuff is the stuff of heresy, and it's why traditional Catholics, when talking about the need for the traditional Mass and preconciliar faith, should never, ever invoke some version of lived experience or other forms of relativism to do it. You cannot defend the truth of the faith by using heresy to defend against heresy. It just doesn't work. It's still modernism, and heresy, even for a good cause, is still a sin. The point of that, though, is to show that she's, on Team Bergoglio 100%. There is to be no illusions about this place. But her appointment is probably illegal. See, there's a pro-prefect, a cardinal appointed to a sister. So you now have a nun, a non-ordained person, a woman, able to order a cardinal around. And we're not talking like a situation here where a cardinal, say, makes a mess of something and a nun whose job it is to clean up, keep Vatican grounds clean, snaps at him. We're not talking that, even though that's still not a good thing to do. This is actual authority over an apostolic person. And it's a diabolical inversion of the hierarchical nature of the Church, of the traditional relationship between men and women. And I'm not the only one who noticed this either. Thanks be to God, someone far more qualified than I am to point this out and notice this too. A priest who published a statement about this on LifeSite News, and they did so, I believe it was yesterday. They give us this headline: Priest Pope Francis broke canon law, Catholic teaching by naming woman as dicastery prefect. If Pope Francis still had a last shred of integrity, he would no longer be able to accuse anyone of disregarding Vatican II or breaking canon law, for he has done both himself on an important issue. Published day before yesterday. Written by Dr. Michael Grichting. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm just winging it. But this is a great example of how Francis is the actual backwardist indie-trist on himself. He's the rigid clericalist now. He's literally trying to bring back one of the corruptions from the Middle Ages that the Council of Trent explicitly condemned. You cannot have lay people ruling over the ordained in Rome. Okay, it's not permitted. This is why it was always cardinals who ran all the Roman cardinals and archbishops who ran the Roman Curia on behalf of the Pope. And here in this, the theologian here writes this and tells the theologian priest here tells us exactly how this is wrong. And so I'm just going to let him do the talking here. The time has now come. The Pope has appointed a woman as prefect of dicastery of the Apostolic See, the one for religious orders. Just to give you a reminder, by the way, she's going to be the smiling face of crushing traditionalist religious orders, by the way. That's what her job's going to be, among other things. The case is puzzling. Either the new prefect can exercise ecclesiastical authority in the name of the Pope, with a citation to canon law, as is the case with the other prefects of the Curia. As she is a layperson, we would be back in the days of the German Imperial Church. At that time, as is well known, there were, quote, bishops who held the office in question and exercised ecclesiastical authority without having been ordained bishops. The damage was immense. The outbreak of Protestantism had a lot to do with this serious grievance. Or the new prefect cannot exercise proper executive church authority in this function after all. Then the appointment is a fake, a pure show. The prefect would then only be a kind of titular prefect. Her title would be a title without means. Has she been given a cardinal who is a bishop as a pro-prefect on the same day, who has to sign everything that has to do with ecclesiastical jurisdiction because the prefect herself has no authority to do so? The appointment was made public without comment. It therefore appears that the Pope is willing to restore the medieval misuse of authority and the law as mentioned above. If this is the case, the following must be stated. A layman as prefect with jurisdictional power, whether man or woman, would first of all be a betrayal of the Second Vatican Council. For this council cleared up the medieval misuses of authority by stating in Lumen Gentium, quote, Episcopal ordination confers with the office of sanctification also the offices of teaching and leadership, which, however, by their very nature can be exercised only in the hierarchical communion with the head and members of the college. This expresses the unity and inseparability of the power of consecration and the power of leadership. Consecration is the ability to receive the power of governance. It has therefore no longer been possible to separate these powers. It has always been disgraceful that the incumbent pope has insulted believers by saying they are, quote, indie-trists, backward-looking people. Now, however, this would also become hypocrisy, for the pope would make himself an indie-trist, going back before Vatican II and restoring medieval misuses of authority. And that's not all. The Code of Canon Law of 1983 and Canon 129, subsection 1, based on Lumen Gentium, states, quote, those who have received sacred orders are qualified, according to the norm of the prescripts of the law, for the power of governance, which exists in the Church by divine institution, and thus also called the power of jurisdiction. Canon 274 states more clearly, quote, only clerics can obtain offices for whose exercise the power of orders or the power of ecclesiastical governance is required. If a woman religious who cannot be and is not a cleric were now to exercise ordinary vicarious authority as prefect of a dicastery of the Roman Curia, this would constitute a breach of canon law on a vital issue. Of course, the Pope can break canon law. There are no consequences for him, but there are for the Church. Canon 333, subsection 3 reads, quote, no appeal or recourse is permitted against a sentence or decree of the Roman Pontiff. And Canon 1404 emphasizes accordingly. The first see is judged by no one. However, the problem of the Pope breaking the law is not a legal one, but a moral one concerning the unity of the Church. In his commentary on Nota Explicitava Preva, which is an integral part of Lumen Gentium, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger emphasized, that'd be Benedict XVI, quote, that in his actions the Pope is not subject to any external tribunal that could act as an appellate authority against him, but is bound by the internal claim of his office, the revelation of the Church. This inner claim of his office, however, also undoubtedly includes a moral commitment to the voice of the universal Church. If this pact between the Pope and the universal Church, which, as already mentioned, is not a legal but a moral one, were to be broken by the Pope, it would plunge the Church into chaos. For if the Pope still had a last shred of integrity, he would no longer be able to accuse anyone of disregarding Vatican II or breaking canon law. For he would now have done both himself on an important issue. Who should abide by doctrine and laws if the guardian of doctrine and laws no longer abides by them? Many of us came to realize we were there a long time ago already. If the appointment of a prefect is anything more than a deep fake that only pretends that a layperson can exercise proper vicarious leadership, the Feast of the Epiphany in 2025 will go down in the history of the Church as the day on which all members of the Church were de facto released by the Pope from obedience to the doctrine and order of the Church. After all, no one would then be able to honestly demand obedience if the Supreme Shepherd himself was no longer willing to do so. Meaning he's disobedient to his duties, so why should we bother following him, giving him obedience? But even if the new prefect is only an operata prefect, meaning like a virtual prefect, the damage has already been done, because the anger of women who are enthusiastic about becoming bishops would be boundless. They would feel that they had been taken for a ride, the victims of an attempted deception. And anyone who has tried to maintain the last remnants of theological seriousness under this pontificate would also be the victim of such a premature April Fool's joke. Enough is enough. He broke canon law. That's what he did. How can you help fix this as a layperson? Praying and fasting. That's what you have to do. Seek sanctity. We get the bishops and priests and popes we deserve. Seek sanctity. Thanks for the super chat, by the way. It is appreciated. Maybe talk to your bishops, but really maybe give support to the women religious. They're going to need it. Again, it's in that the seemingly very nice lady who is the pro-prefectress, or the prefectress now of the dicastery overseeing the religious. It's her mission is synodality. It's all in her language. And the religious orders that get crushed are the ones who don't want to go along with this new synodal religion. Now, this priest is not the only one to respond to this either. Archbishop Vigano called out the man he calls a false pope for not only his hypocrisy, but for his establishment of a false religion. And here in what you're about to see, you can see Vigano link the argument that Francis was never pope because Benedict tried to retain part of the papacy after resigning, as something Francis is doing himself here, not to the papacy, but instead he's bifurcating essentially the authority of a dicastery and giving part of the authority to a layperson who's not qualified to have it. So Vigano posted this on X. And yes, this is his actual X account. I have verified that. He says the following. The appointment of Sister Simona Brambilla as prefectress of the dicastery for institutes of consecrated life and societies of apostolic life is yet another provocation by a character who is the first to live in fiction. As a false pope, he legislates and governs his false church and appoints false prefectresses, just as he creates false cardinals and promulgates false encyclicals. His false pontificate is a huge deception that feeds on the paradox of an enemy of the church who claims to preside over it, of a notorious heretic who usurps the name of Catholic, of a schismatic who accuses his opponents of schism, of one who covers up scandals and surrounds himself with twisted McCarrick types and corrupt blackmailers, and yet dares to speak of quote-unquote transparency. The appointment of a prefectress serves to open the Overton window on the admission of women to holy orders. See the point of this? It's nudging us closer to holy orders, to deaconettes. And to do so, Bergoglian will use precisely that artificial separation between munus and ministerium that Benedict XVI prepared for him on a silver platter with his own unusual resignation. The discomposed papacy, he has a link to a letter of his that I gave to you 2-3 weeks ago on this channel, is intended to allow in the subversive mind of those who want to redefine the papacy in a synodal and ecumenical mold to keep the munus in the hands of a pope, but yet to delegate the ministerium to anyone, either individuals or assembly bodies. And from here, we will move on to the priesthood, where the munus of the holy orders will remain in the words and the hands of the bishop. But the ministerium will also be claimed to be exercised by laymen and lay women, starting with the diaconate to having the priesthood as its final goal. What is disconcerting is not the obscene impudence of the Argentine Jesuit. His provocations have been on the agenda for over a decade now, but rather the cowardly and fearful silence of the episcopate, which too often remains silent for the same reasons that government officials obey the diktats of the elite. And there's Francis shaking hands with the new prefectress of the dicastery for religious. I'm not sure who that figure is standing back behind there. I'm not even sure if that's a bishop or a nun, to be honest with you. That's not the most charitable observation that I've ever made, but whatever. But yes, this is what we're talking about. Francis is pushing the window towards giving them deaconesses, nudging it over. He can't just give them deaconesses. He has to push things and push things and push things. It will probably not be him who gives them deaconesses. It'll probably be Francis II, John the 24th, John Paul III, or whatever name the next pope takes. That's who's probably going to be the one who does this. I could be wrong about that. 2025 may be their year. We shall see. Trish said, did the Pope once say that he would be the cause of schism? Wouldn't the present hierarchy be in schism, not the followers of Jesus, a true church? I am of the mind that you don't go into schism by not moving. If you hold to the same faith and refuse to go along with innovation, you're not the one in schism. They are. His attitude is schismatic. It's just a weird idea. It's a weird idea for a pope to be in schism because he's the unity of the church, essentially. Which would mean that if he was the cause of schism, he couldn't be a pope. I mean, you see how this problem kind of just unfurls itself that way. Margaret says it's an abuse of the office. Canon law, breaking from scripture is not our faith. Not synodal, never will be. My sheep know my voice. We're called to endure trouble, not cause. That is correct. But yes, this is what is going on. And this is, of course, being subsumed by the big news going on in the secular world right now with what's going on in the United States. It's just such is the nature of things, unfortunately. If there's any final thoughts on this in the live chat before we wrap this up. Christ Logos says, so when they voted to make Bergoglio a pope, with Pope Benedict being alive and well, the existing precedent says that Bergoglio could only be made an anti-pope, not pope, since Pope Benedict lived. There have been resignations of popes before. Just the way it happened this time is the source of controversy, because there's some weird wording in Benedict's letters that some have interpreted to mean that they believe he was trying to split the papal office into two offices. Don't know if that's true or not. Plenty of intelligent people have said it is. And plenty of members of the hierarchy who are on our side in general things have said it's not true. Welcome to the diabolic disorientation of the church. Yes, I would suggest also people pray for the people of Southern California right now. By the way, please do so. I mean, if you have to have heard that story. Are we bound to obey this nun? They're not. This nun is not going to impact your life in any way, in a real way. It is, however, unless you attend mass with religious groups, she will be the front face for the moving forward for crushing nuns, crushing traditionalist orders. That's what her job is going to be, among other things. But it's always an enforcement of the documents that govern religious that are the excuse, or moral failings that when you really investigate them are nonsense, like in the Arlington Carmelites. I'm sorry, you can't charge a nun with having broken her vows of celibacy and chastity and the rest with a priest, and then have the priest who's from another diocese, his own bishop, do a deep investigation into the guy and find out it's not true, and then put him back in active ministry, and then still punish that nun and call it that real. You can't do that. You attend an FSSP parish. Well, that's going to be interesting then, because I believe it is the same dicastery that oversees the traditional priestly fraternities. So I'm also one who does not believe they're going to be ignored forever. So we'll see. This is why it's when people ask, what can you do? You pray and you fast, and you offer penances for your bishops to find a spine, for the better cardinals who write all those nice letters that I read to you, but don't do anything. If anything can be done by the cardinals, they're the ones who have to do it, and they have to find the spine and the courage to do it, and they won't. That's why I get so frustrated now with Cardinal Burke. This isn't merely me disagreeing with his weird takes on the SSPX. He promised us a follow-up to the Dubia. We never got it. We never got the follow-up to the Dubia. We were promised fraternal corrections. It didn't really happen. He has hinted that it could be possible for an imperfect council to investigate whether the man acknowledged by the people as the Pope is actually the Pope or not. He hasn't done anything with that, and he's not going to. That's why we get so frustrated. Yeah. Philip says the FSSP, ICKIB are under dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith. I believe they got reassigned, though, a couple years ago. I might be wrong about that, though. But it's always praying and fasting. Remember, our Lord said in the Gospels, when he was talking to a specific case of possession, he said, this kind of demon can only be cast out by prayer and by fasting and prayer. That's where I would start, folks. Support your bishops, become more friendly to the more independent priests if you have to. Who knows what's going to come down the pipeline? I'm not one who thinks that Francis is going to be here forever, but I also don't think he's going to be, departing this mortal coil in the immediate future either. So buckle up, folks, and work on your penance and start thinking about Lent and how to take it more seriously. And as always, I thank you for tuning in today. Please pray for the church. Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.